Keanu Reeves' home sat near the end of a quiet cul-de-sac, surrounded by tall whispering trees and wide lawns that reflected the peacefulness he preferred. While many neighbors kept manicured grass trimmed to HOA perfection, Keanu's yard had slowly transformed into something different, something softer, more alive. The grass was longer in some patches, small bowls of water sat in shaded corners, and the faint sound of animal movement rustled in the green. Keanu didn't design it to defy rules. He simply responded to a need that appeared, one shy paw at a time. It began with a single injured kitten, small, shaking, and hiding under his porch. Keanu had gently coaxed it out with a whisper and a saucer of milk. Then came the stray orange cat that wandered in from the woods. A few days after that, a limping dog found the same porch as refuge. Word must have spread in the unseen language of animals, because soon Keanu's yard became a sanctuary. Not in a wild, chaotic way, but in a tender, instinctive one. A rabbit nestled quietly under the rosemary bush. A crow with a damaged wing perched on a branch by the fence. A tiny hedgehog waddled at dusk near the stone path. Keanu would sit outside in the early morning with a warm cup of tea, quietly greeting each creature by presence alone. Never a command, always an invitation. He wasn't displaying ownership, he was offering refuge. And the animals understood. They approached slowly, trustingly, accepting food or water or rest. For Keanu, it felt like nature had chosen him, not the other way around. He felt honored. Meanwhile, the neighbors noticed the gradual change. At first, just casually, Keanu seems to have some animals around lately. Then more pointedly, there are bowls of food out there. Finally, critically, this looks like an animal shelter. Is that even allowed? But most people simply watched with curiosity or even warmth, especially the children who sometimes glimpsed a sleepy cat in the sun or a small bird hopping along the mulch. There was something poetic and kind about that backyard. Something healing. Inside his home, Keanu kept a simple logbook, handwritten, unpretentious. It listed details like kitten, Monday, fed, cleaned cuts on paw. Dog, Thursday, gave water, seems arthritic. Rabbit, stays under rosemary, leave undisturbed. He wasn't building a rebellion against HOA regulations. He was building trust with fragile lives. And on that quiet morning, as a cool breeze drifted across the yard and small creatures moved softly across the grass, Keanu had no idea that the peace he nurtured was about to stir a storm. The first official spark of trouble arrived in a crisp white envelope bearing the HOA's blue emblem, slid firmly into Keanu's mailbox like a small declaration of war. He found it later that afternoon while returning from a local shelter, where he had picked up antibiotic ointment for the crow's injured wing. Keanu opened the letter calmly, standing by the mailbox with quiet patience, scanning the cold, bureaucratic language. Mr. Reeves, it has come to our attention that your property is hosting a number of stray and wild animals, creating a potential safety and hygiene concern. His brows softened, not in anger, but disappointment. He folded the paper gently and walked back toward the house. A few small animals followed him with hopeful steps, sensing neither threat nor worry. Across the street, blinds shifted. Curious eyes observed. Neighbors knew the HOA had noticed. Some felt uneasy. Some felt sympathetic. Others, secretly, were already rooting for Keanu. But for the board members, the presence of bowls, bedding, small shelters, and even the slightest hint of unregulated compassion was a violation. Later that evening, Keanu attended the monthly HOA meeting held in the community clubhouse. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a sterile brightness on uncomfortable folding chairs. The board president, Mr. Harold Finchley, sat upright with a posture that implied his spine was made of pure ordnance. His glasses were sharp. His voice was sharper. Mr. Reeves, he said, clearing his throat in a manner that demanded attention, your property has become something of a zoo. A few people chuckled quietly. Finchley didn't. Keanu simply replied, they're just animals needing a safe space. I'm helping them until they can heal. Finchley pressed forward. This is a residential community, not a veterinary facility. There are rules, regulations. Keanu met his eyes with the calm, steady gaze of a man who has seen storms far greater than neighborhood politics. Rules are meant to protect people, not keep kindness out. A murmur moved through the room. Some nodded. Some looked nervous. Some looked inspired. The treasurer, Mrs. Lauder, interjected with bureaucratic firmness. If word spreads that stray animals are being accommodated, others might follow. We can't encourage this. Keanu smiled gently because the animals had already followed. Not due to rumor, but instinct. Before he left, Finchley issued the official warning. You have 1 week to remove the animals and restore your property to community standard. After that, you will incur daily fines. Keanu didn't argue. He also didn't apologize. He just said, understood, and quietly walked out. But what the HOA didn't know was that someone had recorded the exchange. Specifically the moment Keanu said, rules are meant to protect people, not keep kindness out. Before sunrise the next day, those 16 words would spread across the neighborhood and beyond. By morning, the air in the neighborhood felt different, like a quiet vibration of awareness ran beneath everyday routine. Phones buzzed across living rooms and kitchen counters as neighbors watched the short video clip from the HOA meeting. It wasn't dramatic or confrontational. It was simply Keanu, in his calm, grounded voice, saying, rules are meant to protect people, not keep kindness out. Many people replayed it, some even showing it to their children, recognizing not rebellion, but earnest compassion. Suddenly, the narrative shifted. It wasn't about animal intrusion, it was about human empathy. By early afternoon, a small knock sounded on Keanu's door. When he opened it, he found Mrs. Harlow, a retired schoolteacher who lived across the street. She held 2 bags of pet food and a blanket. For your guests, she said with a little smile. Behind her, a young couple approached carrying extra water bowls. 2 teenagers from down the block arrived with cans of dog food. Soon, there was a subtle procession of neighbors, people Keanu barely knew, offering small contributions, towels, cardboard bedding, snacks, even gentle words of encouragement. They weren't activists or provocateurs. They were just ordinary people who found themselves moved by something undeniably decent. The sight was not lost on those who passed by. Some shook their heads disapprovingly, muttering about regulations and precedent. But others felt something warm stir in their chest. Seeing the animals, the quiet old dog resting in sunlight, a kitten curled in soft cloth, the crow perched confidently on a low branch, brought a sense of calm and compassion that no policy memo could counter. Kids especially were drawn in. They whispered to animals as if speaking to new friends, their laughter soft and unthreatening. Parents watched them and realized, this wasn't chaos. This was gentle. Rumors began circulating, not of danger, but of kindness. Someone said Keanu was personally calling shelters for placement. Someone else said he paid for vet treatment out of pocket. Another neighbor claimed they saw him reading about animal behavior at night, learning how to reduce stress for injured creatures. Whether these stories were exaggerated or not almost didn't matter. The important truth was this: people believed in his intention, and that belief was contagious. By evening, someone had anonymously set up a small handwritten sign near Keanu's fence. It read, "If kindness is a violation, maybe the rules need changing." No one knew who wrote it, but everyone knew what it meant. The HOA may have authority, but Keanu had something stronger, silent, spreading solidarity. The 4th day brought the inevitable confrontation. Mr. Finchley, the HOA president, marched directly to Keanu's property with a clipboard, flanked by 2 other board members like a miniature tribunal. Keanu was kneeling beside the old limping dog, gently massaging its stiff leg when they arrived. Finchley didn't clear his throat or knock. He simply announced, "This has gone on long enough." His tone carried the confidence of someone used to being the final authority. But Keanu didn't look up with defensiveness or speed. He simply finished his slow, reassuring motion on the dog before standing to face them. Finchley began reading from the violation policy as if reciting sacred scripture. Bringing wildlife or unregistered domestic animals onto a residential property qualifies as a Category B infraction, subject to compound daily penalties. But his voice strained when a small group of neighbors formed quietly nearby. Some stood with arms crossed, others with hands clasped nervously, but all of them present with purpose. It wasn't a protest, not in volume, but in presence. Mrs. Harlow stepped forward and asked, gently but firmly, "Are we punishing him for caring? Is that the message we're sending to our children? To each other?" Finchley tried to regain control, but the words seemed to stick in his mouth. Keanu spoke softly, almost too softly, yet everyone leaned in to hear. These animals came here because they were hurt, or hungry, or scared. They weren't invited, they arrived, and I couldn't turn them away. He gestured toward the hedgehog nestled beneath the rosemary bush, the crow with one wing tucked close, the cats curled in quiet circles. Their little lives, not nuisances. His eyes swept across the gathered people, not theatrically, but honestly. We all get lost sometimes. We all need refuge. It was then that something subtle shifted. The treasurer, Mrs. Lauder, who had previously been rigid in her stance, hesitated as she watched the old dog limp over and press its head gently against Keanu's leg. She murmured something under her breath, barely audible. He was someone's. Finchley, impatient, snapped. Irrelevant. This is a regulated community. But the tone of his voice betrayed the fact that he was losing the room. The power he relied on, the fear of fines, the fear of procedure, was being overshadowed by something he didn't know how to control: empathy. Before the board could retreat into formalities, a neighbor named Daniel stepped forward carrying a folder. He said he had contacted a local animal welfare organization who had provided guidelines and offered to assist with medical support and foster placements. Keanu isn't breaking the spirit of the community, Daniel said. He's representing it. This statement struck the crowd like a quiet bell. Finchley lowered his clipboard ever so slightly. He wasn't convinced, but he was outnumbered, not by force, but by conscience. The confrontation didn't end with triumph or capitulation, but with a realization this was no longer about regulations. It was about what kind of neighbors and what kind of humans they wanted to be. The following week arrived with an unexpected calm. There were no more warning letters, no more clipboard inspections, and no more hard stares from behind neighborhood windows. Instead, the HOA announced a temporary pause on enforcement while community review took place, a bureaucratic phrase that really meant, "We're stepping back because we've lost the moral ground." It wasn't an official surrender, but it was an unmistakable retreat. Finchley kept mostly to himself, his formerly booming voice now contained to structured paperwork and private grumbling, but even he sensed the shift in collective sentiment. The neighborhood was no longer afraid to stand beside Keanu. They were proud to. Keanu continued tending to the animals with the same quiet care as before, but something had changed in the way he moved through the yard. Now he wasn't alone. Mrs. Harlow came by daily, bringing warm cloths and gentle chatter. Daniel coordinated with animal welfare volunteers who scheduled visits and checkups. Children visited after school, learning how to approach a shy cat or speak softly to an anxious rabbit. What began as a solitary act of compassion had evolved into a shared mission. And while not every animal would stay, many were eventually fostered or rehomed. The yard remained open to those still in need. One evening near sunset, Keanu sat on the back steps with the old limping dog at his side. The sky was painted in long ribbons of violet and gold. The dog, now far more relaxed than when it first arrived, rested its head on his knee. Keanu stroked its fur and whispered something only the dog could hear. Just then, Mrs. Lauder approached hesitantly. She knelt beside the animal, her eyes soft and damp. "His name is Ranger," she said quietly. "He belonged to Mr. Carver, the veteran who lived here before. He passed away last year." The revelation settled like a hush across the garden. Ranger wasn't just a stray, he was a grieving companion. And Keanu had unknowingly given him a place to mourn and heal. Mrs. Lauder admitted, voice trembling, "I was too afraid to take him in. I'm glad someone wasn't." Word spread, and the story deepened into something more profound than neighborly kindness. The yard became a symbol, not just of animal rescue, but of human responsibility. The HOA eventually drafted new language in the community guidelines, allowing residents to provide temporary care for injured or stray animals, provided cleanliness and safety were maintained. Not only had Keanu avoided punishment, he had changed the rules. And importantly, he changed them not by demanding authority, but by earning respect. Weeks later, when most of the animals had found homes, the yard returned to its peaceful rhythm. But the bowls stayed. The shaded corners stayed. The spirit of refuge stayed. People still stopped by sometimes just to sit, or breathe, or pet Ranger, who now walked with only a faint limp and a steady heart. Keanu often stood quietly beneath the tall trees, hands in pockets, looking not triumphant, but simply grateful. Because the victory wasn't one of defiance, it was one of compassion shared and multiplied. And in that little cul-de-sac, with its lawns and fences and rules, one simple truth had taken root: kindness once planted is hard to uproot.